Have you ever snapped at your kid over a dropped spoon? Or sat in your car crying because the printer jammed and thought, what is wrong with me? You're not broken and you're not weak. Your nervous system is carrying a full stress bucket of microstressors that finally overflowed. I'm a psychologist and resilience coach, and I see this pattern in high-achieving women every week. You'll learn what allostatic load is, why your bucket is overflowing, and 4 techniques to pull the plug today. The coffee spill that wasn't about coffee. You've just poured your morning coffee. The cup slips from your hand and brown liquid spreads across the counter in seconds. You feel tears rising, or you snap at your child for walking too close, or you suddenly have to leave the room before you scream at someone you love because a tiny spill feels like the end of the world. Nothing catastrophic happened this morning, but your body reacted like there was a tiger in the room, and you can't understand why a spilled drink triggers panic, while real emergencies somehow feel easier to handle. This reaction feels crazy, but it isn't crazy at all, because it's pure biology doing exactly what evolution wired it to do when your nervous system senses overload, which means your body treats a tiny spill like a genuine threat. Scientists call this allostatic load, though I call it your stress bucket. Every microstressor adds a drop, and your bucket doesn't empty overnight, no matter how well you sleep. When the bucket fills completely, even the tiniest splash overflows it and creates a reaction that looks crazy from the outside but makes perfect sense inside your body. Research confirms what you already feel inside your body every day. Daily stressor exposure and emotional reactivity to minor hassles predict later allostatic load levels. Your body keeps score even when your mind insists you should be fine. And that mismatch between expectations and biology is exactly what makes the coffee spill feel so confusing. The spilled coffee was never about the coffee. It was the final drop that hit a bucket already brimming with unpaid invoices, sleepless nights, and text messages from your mother's nurse. Your nervous system did exactly what it was designed to do when capacity runs out. So the smallest inconvenience suddenly becomes the breaking point everyone sees. It was never the coffee, it's the bucket, and you need to see what's filling it before you can start pulling the plug and emptying it for good, because naming the drips is the only way to stop them from flowing. You aren't broken, even though it feels that way. Your bucket has been filling for months while you blamed yourself for being weak. And nobody told you that reactivity to small hassles is one of the earliest signs of physiological overload. Your nervous system has a bucket. Allostatic load is the fancy term scientists use. I call it your stress bucket because that image helps you feel what's happening inside you every day. And once you picture it, everything else makes sense. Every micro stressor adds a drop, whether it's an urgent email, a text about your child's fever, or a looming tax deadline you've been avoiding for weeks. Each one seems small on its own. But your bucket doesn't empty overnight, and when it's full, even one drop overflows into tears, rage, or that heavy numbness you've been feeling. Your stress bucket lives in more than your head. It lives in your HPA axis, which is the hormonal command center that releases cortisol when your brain perceives threat, and it lives in your autonomic nervous system, which controls your heart rate, breathing, and digestion while your immune and metabolic systems work overtime. You don't need a lab. Your blood pressure creeps up and your heart rate variability trends down while your sleep gets lighter. And researchers typically measure 10 to 20 biomarkers to compute an allostatic load score. But your body tells you the truth long before any test confirms what you sense inside. Cortisol is your body's main stress hormone, and when demands keep coming, it stays elevated instead of spiking and dropping the way nature intended, leaving your system flooded even when the danger has passed. Heart rate variability measures how flexibly your nervous system shifts between alert and calm, and lower HRV means your body is stuck in fight or flight mode. That rigidity is what drains your bucket fastest. You feel it in the afternoon crash that no coffee fixes, in the tight shoulders that massage therapists can't loosen, and in that sense of dread before you check your phone in the morning. Your brain, your hormones, your heart, and your immune defenses are all playing out of tune together, and that's why it shows up everywhere, from your sleep to your temper. Entrepreneurs get hit harder because identity fusion ties self-worth directly to venture outcomes. So a revenue dip or lost client triggers a personal failure response that dumps a whole cup into your bucket at once. This is why a simple refund request can ruin your afternoon. Your biology treats it like a threat to survival. Researchers usually need a whole panel of lab markers to score allostatic load precisely. You don't need that level of detail to know your bucket is heavy. You feel it in your shoulders, your gut, and that quiet dread that shows up before you open your eyes in the morning, because your body is speaking a language your mind has been trained to ignore. Under chronic load, the part of your brain that handles planning and impulse control starts to slow down. Your amygdala, which detects threats, becomes jumpier. That combination makes small problems look big and big decisions look impossible, which is exactly what happens when an overflowing bucket starts controlling your life and stealing the judgment you built your business on. Most women miss 2 of the 3 drips entirely. They waste energy fixing the wrong thing while the real sources keep pouring in unnoticed, and that's why their calendars look perfect but their buckets stay full even after a spa day. Let me show you the 3 drips that are probably filling your bucket right now. Some are obvious, like revenue pressure and team conflict. Others are invisible, and those hidden drips are the ones that fill your bucket fastest because you don't even notice them landing while you blame yourself for not being tough enough. The 3 drips nobody talks about. Drip 1 is the business drip, and it's the one most women expect. Revenue pressure, team management, client demands, and the constant decision-making of running a company fill your bucket drop by drop, especially when your self-worth is fused to venture outcomes, so a lost client feels like rejection. When your business identity and personal identity merge, every setback dumps a whole cup instead of a drop. A refund request stings like betrayal. A slow month whispers that you aren't good enough, and that silent fusion is brutal because you never see it coming until the bucket is already full. Drip 2 is the caregiving drip. In Canada, women were almost 4 times more likely than men to be caregivers even before the pandemic, with 79% of women versus 22% of men carrying that load. You're probably running a household, raising kids, checking in on aging parents, or some combination of all 3, and each role demands presence you can't fake. This is the sandwich generation reality, and it isn't a temporary phase. Caring for children while monitoring aging parents creates a double bind where someone always needs something, and the mental load of doctors, schools, meals, and emotions never shows up on a calendar. But it fills your bucket just the same. Drip 3 is the one almost nobody names. It's the invisible drips of boundary violations, people-pleasing, and saying yes to quick favours that steal 10 minutes here and 20 minutes there while you smile and pretend it's no trouble. It's the emotional labour of managing everyone else's feelings while nobody asks how you're doing. Most women try to handle each drip separately. They buy a better planner for work and stricter routines for home, but they never look at the total volume in the bucket. So fixing one drip while 2 others keep flowing leaves them exhausted and confused again. Founder guilt whispers that you should be working harder. Caregiver guilt whispers that you should be present more. Together they form a double guilt system that makes you overcompensate at work and overcompensate at home, which means you pour into both roles from the same empty cup and call it balance. Research shows that overlapping guilt systems drive overwork and poor decisions. Founder guilt makes you say yes to bad opportunities because turning them down feels like failure, and caregiver guilt makes you cancel your own meetings because being there for everyone else feels like the only acceptable choice. Neither guilt is based on reality, and both keep adding drops while you tell yourself you should be able to handle more. The sandwich generation reality hits women hardest because cultural norms still assign primary care responsibility to daughters and mothers. You aren't imagining the weight. It's structural and it's real, which means your stress bucket is carrying a load that many of your male peers simply don't face in the same volume. Boundary violations are especially costly because they pretend to be small. A quick favour isn't quick, and an after-hours message isn't just a message. Each one carries an invisible tax of emotional labour, and women entrepreneurs pay that tax far more often than they invoice for actual work, while their buckets fill with stress that looks like nothing on a timesheet. Until you see all 3 drips at once, you'll keep treating the symptoms. The source keeps running freely. The calendar gets better, but the bucket stays full. The routines improve, but the tears still come. And that's the trap that keeps you exhausted while you blame your character instead of your biology. What overflow does to your brain and business. And when that bucket overflows, you don't only cry over coffee, you also change how you lead and decide in your business every single day. And the warning signs show up quietly at first before they start screaming. You notice a short fuse. Simple emails sit unanswered because opening them feels like lifting a boulder, and you say yes when you mean no, then resent the commitment while your sleep gets lighter and you wake tired despite spending 8 hours in bed. Chronic stress reduces activity in your prefrontal cortex, which handles planning, impulse control, and strategic thinking. So the very skills that built your business start fading exactly when you need them most. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detector, becomes jumpier. That brain shift makes small irritations feel like emergencies, and big strategic decisions feel like threats you need to avoid because your threat circuits are running hot. This neurological shift creates real business damage. You become reluctant to delegate because letting go feels unsafe, and you take fewer risks because loss aversion grows under chronic load, while poor boundaries lead to overworking that creates more stress and adds more drops to a bucket that's overflowing. Research links allostatic load to cardiometabolic disease and functional decline over time. That isn't abstract worry. That's your blood pressure, your glucose, and your inflammation markers creeping in the wrong direction while you tell yourself you'll rest when the launch is over, except the launch never ends, and neither does the drip. But a full bucket isn't a character flaw. It's a signal that your biology is asking for relief. And you can pull the plug once you know how, because the same systems that fill the bucket can also empty it when you use the right tools. Founder guilt alters startup decisions through rumination and cognitive overload. You replay conversations at 2 a.m, you second-guess pricing you already set, and you avoid hard conversations because your brain is too depleted to handle conflict. So the business stagnates while you work harder. Status quo bias gets stronger under chronic stress. You cling to failing strategies because changing them feels like another drop in an already full bucket. I coached a woman who kept a client for 6 months who paid late and demanded revisions on every delivery. She knew the relationship was bleeding money, but the thought of firing him felt harder than absorbing the abuse. That's what a full bucket does to decision making. It makes obvious choices feel impossible. You feel bristly all day because your nervous system is stuck in low-grade fight or flight. A Slack notification makes your heart race, and a polite question from your partner feels like an attack. This heightened amygdala reactivity turns every interaction into a potential threat, and your business relationships suffer because people sense the tension before you say a word, which means you lose clients and trust while you blame yourself for being moody. The vicious cycle is the part that scares me most as a psychologist. Overflow leads to worse decisions, and worse decisions create more stress, and more stress adds more drops until the bucket feels permanently full and you start believing overwhelm is simply the price of success. 4 ways to pull the plug technique. 1. The physiological sigh technique. 1 is the physiological sigh, and it's the fastest way to pull a drop from your bucket before you snap at your child or send an email you'll regret for days. You don't need a spa day, you need 30 seconds in your own lungs when the heat is rising. Here's what to do. Take 2 short inhales through your nose, then 1 long exhale through your mouth, and repeat that 3 times. That pattern modulates carbon dioxide in your blood and engages lung stretch receptors, which shifts your nervous system toward recovery and slows your heart rate in under a minute so you can respond instead of react. Use it before you answer a frustrating email, before you walk into a difficult conversation, or in the car between work and home, because that transition is where most women drop their last bit of reserve. I've got clients who set a phone reminder for 3 physiological sighs at lunch. One woman told me it saved her from snapping at her daughter 4 times in 1 week. Technique 2, the 3 R's, respite, reappraisal regimen. Technique 2 is the 3 R's, which are respite, reappraisal, and regimen. Entrepreneurs need recovery that fits real work days, not vague advice to relax more on a beach someday when your inbox is already overflowing and your mother needs a ride to the doctor. The 3 Rs give you a structure that turns recovery into a business system instead of a wish. Respite means scheduled micro breaks and boundary rituals. Take a 90-second walk without your phone between meetings, or step outside after a difficult call. These tiny pauses interrupt the stress accumulation that fills your bucket drop by drop. And they work because they're planned rather than accidental, which means you put them in the calendar before it fills with everyone else's demands. Reappraisal means reframing stressors as challenges or learning signals. After a setback, ask yourself what skill this can help you build, because a lost client becomes feedback on positioning and a failed launch becomes data on messaging. This reframing shifts neural processing from amygdala panic to prefrontal cortex problem solving, and it changes how your brain encodes the event so the same stressor weighs less next time. Regimen means structured routines. Embed both respite and reappraisal into your actual workday, with same morning breathing, same evening digital sunset, and same weekly review. When recovery becomes a regimen instead of a rescue, your bucket starts draining daily instead of overflowing weekly, and you stop waiting for collapse before you care for yourself. Technique 3, boundary scripts that stop the drips. Technique 3 is boundary scripts. They matter because every unenforced boundary is an invisible drip. Scripts remove the decision fatigue of saying no in the moment, and they protect your bucket from filling up while you're still figuring out how to respond. A good script has 3 parts. You can start with optional appreciation, then state a clear boundary, and finish with a next step. You don't need to apologise or over-explain. You simply state what's true and what happens next. And you let the other person adjust to your clarity instead of wasting energy managing their reaction to a boundary they should have respected. Script A is for after-hours messages. Say this exactly. Thanks for sending this over. I unplug after 6 p.m. to be present with my family, so I'll review this tomorrow during business hours, and you can expect a response by 2 p.m. Script B is for scope creep. Say this. Please clarify exactly what you need, and depending on that, I'll let you know if it fits within our current scope or if we should add it as a separate project. This script puts the work back on their plate without you working for free. Technique 4, the non-negotiable 7-hour sleep window. Technique 4 is the non-negotiable 7-hour sleep window. It's the most important drain plug on this list, and sleep is when your bucket actually empties, and chronic sleep disruption is neuroendocrine and immune dysregulation, which means a bad night leaves you tired and also widens the gap between what you can handle and what keeps coming. It adds drops while you lie there blaming yourself for not being able to switch off. You need a consistent 7-hour window. Set a digital sunset 60 to 90 minutes before bed and set a phone alarm for that sunset instead of only your wake-up time. Use physiological size before sleep to shift your nervous system toward restoration and track sleep quality instead of only tracking hours, because deep, solid sleep restores you more than broken sleep that lasts longer, and your brain consolidates the learning you need for tomorrow's decisions during those recovery windows. One client told me that protecting her sleep window felt harder than any boundary she'd ever set with a client. She was wrong about that. It was the boundary that changed everything, because once her bucket started draining overnight, she stopped crying over coffee in the morning and started handling her team with patience she had forgotten she had. Your weekly bucket. Check. The fastest way to fail is to try everything at once and track nothing. I want you to have a simple weekly dashboard inspired by the Cage-Tell framework, but stripped down so much that you can run it with pen and paper while your phone stays in another room. No apps or spreadsheets are required, and all you need is a few minutes of honest reflection at the end of each day. Each evening, rate your day from 0 to 4. Perceived stress, emotional reactivity, fatigue, and somatic symptoms like headaches or muscle tension are your 4 signals. Add them up to get your daily strain score, which tells you how full your bucket got that day and whether your nervous system is approaching the overflow point you now know how to recognize. Then rate your recovery. Breathing practice, movement, social connection, and sleep quality are your 4 recovery signals. Add those to get your daily recovery score, which tells you how much you drain the bucket and whether your efforts are actually working to empty what the day filled. Once a week, label yourself green, yellow, or red. Green means low strain and adequate recovery, while yellow means moderate strain or early warning shifts. Red means sustained high strain with inadequate recovery, and red means you need action that day instead of waiting until next Monday, because your bucket is already overflowing and every new drop comes out as tears, rage, or numbness. If you hit yellow, add 1 technique from the 4 I just taught you. If you hit red, cancel 1 optional commitment and protect your sleep window that night, instead of trying to add 3 new habits when you're already drowning, because adding complexity to an overflowing bucket is like pouring bleach on a fire. Add 1 drain plug at a time and let your weekly label guide what you need most. Your stress bucket is real, it's biological, and you can start draining it today with 1 breathing technique and 1 boundary script that you can use before your next frustrating email arrives in your inbox and pushes you closer to the edge. Start with 1. If you want the advanced resilience routines I teach my coaching clients, subscribe and watch this video next, because the next one builds on everything we covered here.